Hi, this is Andrew Markus. Welcome to Film Music Mentor. Today's topic, composer or poser? How can you tell the difference? All right, composer or poser? How can you tell the difference? Well, there's basically four kinds of musicians that work in film and television. There's this myth or this delusion that if someone's a musician, they can score a film. It's just not so. A film composer is a very specific kind of personality and a very specific kind of musician. Okay, so we have this one scenario where we have a musician that someone in the production knows, director, a producer, an editor. Hey, I know this guy, great guitar player. Hey, I know this woman, she's a fantastic piano player. We should get her to do the music. We should get him to do the music. And it just doesn't translate. Writing music, it's a talent, but it's also a lot of acquired skill, a lot of study, a lot of knowledge. So if someone can write a few songs, that's one thing. But to craft a score for a film, it's really not the same thing. It's very different. In fact, there's been a number of times where I've been hired to score a film because of this very reason. Someone was brought into the project, they're a friend of someone involved, they write songs, they produce songs, and they end up throwing a bunch of songs into the film, and at some point they go, wait, this doesn't work. This isn't a film score. It needs to be scored, and a lot of time and money is wasted. And it's not just that, it's disappointing to the person that you asked because they were kind of thrown into this situation they weren't ready for. So it's partially their fault, partially the production's fault, but it's never done out of malice. It's just something that people don't truly understand. So that's one thing. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes this works out great, but that's one particular scenario. A second particular scenario, a very well-known singer or songwriter or musician of some acclaim in a different area is approached to do the music for a film because the director loves their work. Um, Now, a situation like Trent Reznor, where, if I'm not mistaken, David Finch loved his music and wanted him to score his pictures, obviously that worked out great. Trent Reznor's a fantastic, enormous talent, and that worked out well. But that's not really what happens all the time. I would say that Trent Reznor is an exception to the rule. He's at the top of the music world, and he got right to the top of the film music world, and he performed brilliantly. He did a great job on all of his works. But again, this is an exception and not the rule. So be wary. Just because someone's good at one thing doesn't mean they'll excel at another thing. Another scenario, you have a musician that writes music that's maybe not songs, maybe not commercially viable, and they feel like, well, you know what? My music sounds like it could be used in film. Now, sometimes this is a musician that specializes in a genre, and a lot of times they can get a lot of income by putting their music in music libraries, and they get used for reality shows and things like that, or commercials, and that's great. There's a lot of fantastic music out there like that. I have a music library collection. I publish the work of other people, so there's a really huge value in that. However, most of those musicians are not they're not really up to the task of scoring a film, and there's a really important distinction. So when you write music for a music library, or you want it to be you want the editors to listen and go, "Ooh, I like that," the music has to have a certain a fullness, a polish, to get the attention of the person putting it into the picture. However, very often that music is a little too dense for the function of a program or a film, and it doesn't really work that well. Also, music libraries tend to want music that doesn't change tempo or speed, doesn't change key or the kind of area of chords and pitches it uses. That's not something that is a custom in that kind of writing. And film music is very much the opposite. You want to constantly and expand and contrast to keep the tension going in a scene, especially a long one. Um, When dialogue comes in and out, we want to thin out the music. We want to thicken the music when there's less speaking, depending on the circumstance. But it's sort of the opposite approach of this kind of music where you're writing for the sake of someone to listen to it and go, oh, I like that, and try to fit it in. So this is a different kind of musician. Now, some musicians, write for the music library and they're composers and they do both and they do it well. Finally, there's the last type of composer, the the film composer. And a film composer is someone who's a cinephile. They love movies. They're trained. They can be self-taught, or they can be university or conservatory trained, but there is some training involved, and it's really important because the toolbox of the classical composer is very similar to the toolbox of the film composer. But usually, a film composer has a classical and a very pop or theatrical or jazz background as well. So the film composer, um, they excel at a number of musical genres, and they have this dramatic sense of when to start music, when to change music, and when to stop the cue. And that, along with the director or producer's recommendations and instructions and tastes and desires, is what really makes a film score. Not just throwing in a bunch of music, or not just bringing someone in because they're a friend of someone involved. Although that can work. I'm not saying those things don't work, but there's this uh, kind of person with the DNA of a film composer where they work huge amount of hours. They work tirelessly. They can change music very quickly. They can write music very quickly. They can start over. They can edit the music. They can you know, kind of have they have this combination of a real passion for what they're doing and a detachment where if it's not working, they can quickly move on to the next thing. And the more experience a film composer has, the more experience the musician has working with other directors, other producers, other projects, the more it benefits you because you can get the knowledge and the experience from those other artists through the composer because they can say, hey, look, something like this happened on a film I did last year and it didn't work out for this reasons. Would you consider trying this? And you will or you won't. It's up to you. But basically, there are these four types of people that are doing film work. One, the person who kind of gets in because they're the friend of somebody. Two, the very well-known artist where a film director, producer, etc., knows their work, loves their work, and invites them to score the film. Again, Trent Reznor, great job. Other times, not so great. Three, there's the kind of musician that isn't necessarily a songwriter, writes instrumental music, and kind of thinks, hey, you know, let me give film music a chance. Let me put my music out there. I've got tracks for you. And again, it can work, could not work. Then you have the film composer, the person that lives, breathes, and dreams film music. Their brain is constantly on alert on how to solve dramatic problems, how to solve sound problems, how to elevate a story. That's how you can tell if someone's a poser or a composer. Thank you for joining me. This is Film Music Mentor. I'll see you next time.